Welcome to Kim Talks Resilience, where we share stories of insight and inspiration in life, love, and business with resilient women from around the world. Speaking with authors, entrepreneurs, founders, and coaches to learn their strategies for a more resilient life so we can all build the life we love. I'm your host, Kim Hayden. So I'm excited today because I had the honor of being on Pat Wetzel's podcast, Bump in the Road. And I think the podcast is so well done. And Pat is she is an incredible wealth of knowledge and leadership that we all should be listening a little bit closer to what Pat brings to the table. So Pat Wetzel is an award-winning author, blogger, photographer, and speaker. And she elevates other people's lives and stories from behind still and film cameras. As a seasoned interviewer, this is what I love, a seasoned interviewer, engaging writer, and an entrepreneur. A Wharton School of Business graduate, she escaped the corporate world to soar her sailplane. I love this. I got to reread this, and we're going to correct this in post. So let's going to take this right from the top because there's a lot of content here. Pat Wetzel is an award-winning author, blogger, photographer, and speaker, and she elevates other people's lives and stories from behind still and film cameras as a seasoned interviewer, engaging writer, and entrepreneur. A Wharton School of Business graduate, she escaped the corporate world to soar her sailplane around the country, testing her limits and feeding her appetite for adventure. Then she hit a bump in the road. A diagnosis of supposedly incurable cancer led her to start Anti-Cancer Club, a cancer resource website. Realizing that travel could be transformative, she created Cancer Road Trip to connect cancer survivors with once-in-a-lifetime journeys. Then the world hit a bump. When the COVID-19 pandemic slammed the brakes on travel, Pat pivoted again. She now metaphorically travels the world, conversing with inspirational individuals, navigating their own transformative experiences with resilience and courage as the founder and voice of the internationally acclaimed Bump in the Road podcast. You can get her at bumpintheroad.us. She's based in Arizona. So let's actually bring her in. And hopefully Pat will forgive me for, I get so excited I get tongue-tied. So, how are you doing today, Pat?
I'm doing great.
Awesome. Well, here at the show, we like to start out to give a little preface as to who our guest is. Can you share with us a bit of who is Pat Wetzel?
Oh, no, that's an interesting question. And somebody asked me that the other day. I'm used to interviewing other people. So when somebody asks me, I have to pause. And I suppose I would say I'm a creative, curious, smart woman who's had more than a few bumps in the road that have really led me to where I am right now.
And so that hence Bump in the Road. So let's go into what you do, because you've escaped. I love that, escaped the corporate world, and you were on that trend before we went through COVID, and now we have the generation resignation going on, right? So you led that march. Tell us what you're doing today that it's not sets you apart, but sets you in the leadership space that makes you available. So talk about a bit what you do today.
I think what I'm doing is really the culmination of my own trip. I've had enormous highs and lows in my life. Some they have not been easy, but I think that there's a lot of wisdom that comes from that type of experience. And for me, it's really led to a journey within to better understand myself and therefore the world around me, to seek peace within myself. And I meditate regularly along those lines. I think that those bumps have been just critical. And I realize that everybody has a bump. Some are easier than others. Actually, I take that back. None of them are easy. But how do we navigate them? What are the qualities and the traits that allow us to get around these bumps and still and live a fulfilled life? What are we supposed to learn? Those are the sorts of questions that just fascinate me. So that's what I'm doing, both in the podcast and the upcoming book.
So there's a lot of female entrepreneurs out there who would like to have a podcast, who would like to write a book, who would like so, let's break this down from the entrepreneurial standpoint, right? Walk me through what your business looks like and how you um, build the opportunities of connection, collaboration, and remuneration. Like, how do you get paid for what you do? Because you're living a life right now that a lot of women want to live. They want to be a voice that's heard. They want to speak at events. They want to write a book. So, walk me through that a bit. Give me an idea as to how we can be more like Pat.
Well, first of all, nothing comes immediately. It takes time. Bump in the road came about because of COVID. Obviously, I had I was in the process of putting together Cancer Road Trip, which, to back up a little bit, I was diagnosed with supposedly incurable cancer in 2009 and went through 6 years of treatment. During that period, I started Anti-Cancer Club, which in 2016 had over 40 million impressions on Twitter alone. Um, after in building that, I didn't build that to monetize. I had another platform that I had designed to monetize. I went down to Silicon Valley to raise money, had some interest, but I needed to provide a beta platform first. So I hired a company to do the engineering for me, but they never really carried through. Instead of providing me with the platform that I had contractually agreed to, they took my intellectual property and registered it with the US Patent Office as their own. So I brought in a host of expensive lawyers who did absolutely nothing other than inform me that it would cost me in increments of half a million dollars, take 3 years of my life, and there was no defined outcome because intellectual property theft is rampant. So at this point, my hair's falling out, not from chemo, but from stress. I'm vomiting blood, and I go to see my oncologist. And he rubs his hands together and he says, I'm sure we can find something wrong with you, and lists a litany of horrible, expensive, invasive tests. And he never asked me what was going on with my life. So I left that office and I thought for a bit, and I decided I had just had it. I had had it on so many levels. So I put my house up for sale. I put everything in storage and I hit the road and I started Cancer Road Trip. And I realized I was so fortunate to be able to do what I was doing that I would like to give that back for others. So the idea was to give 7 people every quarter an amazing bucket list trip. The first trip was to be Tanzania, where we could get 3 episodes. We could do Kilimanjaro, Safari, and Zanzibar. I had $1 million in corporate commitments lined up, and COVID hit. So after spending about 3 weeks eating potato chips, curled up under the covers in bed, totally depressed. I mean, like, what do I do now? I decided to start a podcast. The world was so uncertain, nobody knew what would happen or anything would go. And it occurred to me I should call it Bump in the Road. So I just dove in. So for anybody thinking about doing this, don't do what I did leading up to it. You can find a much easier route, I'm sure. But I just dove in and I figured out what I needed to do. At first, I had a fairly expensive sound engineer who did a fantastic job and taught me a great deal. But since I've migrated my sound engineering over to a gentleman on Fiverr, which is much more affordable, I did the initial podcast probably for a little over a year and a half. Then I added a paid subscription tier. And now with the book coming out, Bump in the Road, which looks at my guests, the bumps they faced, how they've navigated it. There will be a new section of the website that'll be just for people who bought the book, that'll have private information, new videos, as well as unedited podcasts in full. So that's what I'm up to now. The writing part, I always thought I would write, but I put it aside for corporate jobs. And now it's come full circle, and I love it. It is an absolute passion. I'm very, very grateful to be here. It has not been an easy road. So I tell that story for anybody who's thinking about starting a podcast, do it. It will take you in directions you don't expect. You will learn a ton. You'll meet great people. and be open, be flexible, and be creative along the way.
And you know, I've spent 20 hours a week for the last almost 2 years in this podcasting space. So I always joke and say that I have a bachelor's in podcasting because I've been very hands-on on every interview. I've done all of this myself. I've done the post-production, the pre-production, and everything. So I get that. My question to you would be, because so you say speaker. So in your pre-COVID life, first of all, how did you get people to invest? Because this is the women, so women founders, and a lot of women work from heart-centered
Mhm.
spaces, right? So they work from uh, passion projects, which are important. These are important things. Um, but yet they're completely underfunded in the sense that they're bootstrapping it and you know, they don't know where to go looking for funding or anything.
I
Are
have
you
self-funded
finding
I've self-funded this. You need to be aware that if you look at, say, the VC market, what, maybe 3% of the funds, somewhere in
yeah,
that range, go to women. Women simply, I hate to say this, but women will not get funding. You are gonna have to find more creative ways to find funding, whether it's with friends, with some sort of repayment scheme, whether it's out of your own savings. It is extremely difficult for a woman to get funded. And I'm perfectly qualified. I mean, look, I've been involved in the bond market, international acquisitions and divestitures, investment advisory services. I know my way around a bit. I can give a good presentation. But I think the reality is investors want tangible toys. They want a piece of software. They want a gadget. They don't
yeah.
understand that there's a massive market, over half of us, who actually would appreciate something less tangible: wisdom, knowledge, community, sharing, and they do not invest in that. They can't see the immediate return. And I personally think it goes to several things. Forgive me, I'm going to be a little bit sexist here, but people like to do business with people like themselves. It's a very male market, and men tend to be more tangible and hierarchical, where women tend to be more connective oriented. So if you're pitching to an audience who's tangible and hierarchical, and you don't fit that mold, your chances of getting any attention just plummet.
Yeah, I would agree, and this is you know, this is what I'm constantly kind of pounding my head against the wall is like, okay. However, we are seeing new private equity funds coming up that are women led. Like we look Sarah Blakely from Spanx
Mhm.
now has grants and loans for women startups. So that's great. We're starting to see these types of things. But you're absolutely correct. Um,
And I would
traditionally,
ask, I'm not familiar with her funds or anything
yeah,
that, what her criteria are, but I would really be curious to know, are her criteria that much different than a traditional equity fund?
yeah, and that's the thing is, and I know that there's also what is it, Smile Alice, I believe, out of Texas. That is, oh, I want to say, and it's not Romney's wife. Who is it? It's one of the former president's wife and niece or something has started some sort of program. I have to look it up. But there it's and then that I know that there is a program out of Chicago now. So I would love actually I'm going to put this out there if anybody's listening and you're good at research, what would be cool is to have comprehensive list, a cohesive list of all the different programs that have cropped up in the last 18 months for women founded businesses.
And
Um,
one of the things I think you want on the list is what they expect in return, because
yeah,
most funds are looking for a 20x return. They understand that 19 out of 20 companies will fail. They need that one to hit 20x or more out of the ballpark. It is more difficult, I think, to hit those sorts of numbers without going the tech route.
yeah, oh, absolutely. And you know, I just read the other day that if you're coaching, you have a 12-month reimbursement phase, whereas if you're doing a SaaS product, it's only a 90-day. And so they're going, well, why would I coach when I could just put this in a self-guided SaaS product, white label it from something else. So yeah, it's
Mhm.
it's it's interesting because these are the conversations that every woman who is looking at stepping out wants to get on stage. Most women I talk to want to be able to be on a stage and speak and share, myself included. Myself included. But it's still a self-funded journey. It's still a self-funded journey, so looking at every opportunity. Let's talk a little bit about your speaking, because this is one thing that literally 9 out of 10 women I speak to, this is what they want. They want to be heard. They want to have stages, right? Talk to me about your evolution into the speaking world, where that originated from. What are some of the bumps in the roads that you've hit? And what are some of the like success stories? Because this is what a lot of women want to do.
I'll start with your last point. I think my biggest success story has been from looking within. What was preventing me from doing better? What old voices in my head were telling me I wasn't good enough? I wasn't, who am I to be heard? And things along those lines. And we all have those energy blockages, if you will, that hold us back. And I think that has been really going within and spending the time to do that has given me the biggest return. Now, my speaking career is still a little bit fledgling. I'm reaching out. I'm starting to talk about the book. I have a few things booked this year. And again, like everything else, it is a gradual process. You speak at one group, they tell another. You present in one place, and word starts to get out. You have to be patient and be willing to build these things. They do not build themselves, and they do not happen overnight. It's like building a social media following. If you're not a celebrity, it takes a lot of work and time and diligence to do that.
And consistency, that's the big one.
Yes.
And that's, I think, the biggest challenge for most of us is life gets in the way and
You can't let
none
that
is
happen. You gotta
exactly.
be my Mondays are marketing Monday. there are aspects of marketing Monday that I really don't like, but
Yeah.
that's it. It has to get done. And, you know, I think for me, I do the things I like least first, then I get to do the things I like.
I eat the
Yeah.
frog, right? And for those of you under 40, eat the frog basically means do what you don't love first, so you get it out of the way. Um, so what's new? What's coming down the pipe for you? You've uh, we're going to jump into your book here in a moment, but what else is coming down the pipe? You're saying that you're now reaching out for speaking gigs. You're, you know, are you still looking at the cancer trips? Are you like, what's coming down the road for you?
The cancer trips are on indefinite hold. The world is so uncertain. The liability risk with that is significant, particularly now with all these health variables. Really, the liability aspect of it's become too large to do, but from where I stand. Um, what's coming down the road, the biggest thing I have coming down the road is my book and workbook. And I'm really excited about both. And the book is the first of a series of books. This first one's an
Excellent.
anthology. And I started it last year. So it's, excuse me, some of my earlier guests. And I have so many great stories to tell. I mean, I have such great guests that I'm planning a series of books. Excuse me, still getting over a little bit of a cold. The first one's Bump in the Road, an anthology, where we look at how people use different aspects of themselves to manage and navigate and learn from the bumps in the road. It has a workbook, which I'm very excited about. The workbook is really fun, both in terms of exploring your own reactions to stories and in terms of sharing, say at a book club or something like that. The next book, I'm a little up in the air. I think it's going to be Bump in the Road, Strong Women, because I think women have such fabulous stories to tell. But I'm also now looking at other segments: business, sports, cancer, um, because all these verticals, if you will, have so much wisdom in them. And I would urge anybody, even if it's bump in the road sports and you don't like sports, there's a lot to learn there. Same thing, bump in the road cancer. People just, oh, cancer, stay away from me. But you
Yeah.
might be surprised at the wisdom that people have garnered going through that type of existential experience.
Oh, I totally agree. James Clear, everything
Yeah.
he does is in a baseball analogy,
Mhm.
but it does not negate the incredible information that's in Atomic Habits. So, you know, yeah, I find that, it's funny because have seen it more so since COVID, and I think that's we all got locked in with our Facebook account, and people are less. Um, Tolerant to lean into something that they don't view as directly within their vertical or directly within their belief system. And you know what, that's one thing that you just said, Pat, that I think we all need to practice, and that's to be curious, to be open, because you're not going to grow if you stay within your own kind of silo of
You know,
information.
one of my guests said, "What would my more curious self do today?"
Oh,
Isn't
that's a
that
good one.
isn't that good? I
That
thought
is
that
a
was
very good one.
marvelous because it really makes you think, do something dumb, drive a different way, buy a different vegetable. It doesn't have to be anything outrageous, but introducing change and novelty and curiosity into your life will make your life so much richer.
I 100%, 100%. Be curious, because curiosity helps you grow, and embrace progress. Do not look for perfection. I always tell people, are going, "Oh, I'm waiting for it to be perfect." And it's like, you do know the definition of perfection.
you,
Perfection, yeah. You
you're
don't want
talking
to be
to a
dead.
recovering perfectionist.
Oh, there you go. Have you ever read the definition of perfection?
No, what
Perfect.
is it?
Complete. Nowhere left to go.
Oh,
So the only day I will be perfect is the day I hit the grave and everybody tells everybody how perfect I was. I want to be messy and in progress my entire life. It means I'm growing, because if you're not growing, you're dying. Simple. It's very simple there. So I what I want to do is I want to talk about, and I think you've already touched on several points of resiliency, but do you have a defining moment in either building this business, this path, or in something even earlier in your life, that without digging deep into your personal resiliency, we would not be having this conversation?
oh, oh, so many instances. You know how James Clear uses baseball as an analogy? I use flying as an analogy. Um, I learned to fly sailplanes, which are high performance gliders, 15-meter plus wingspan. I mean, they're massive wingspans. They're beautifully crafted fiberglass ships, and they can travel hundreds of miles with no engine. It's like three-dimensional surfing, or three-dimensional sailing, air sailing. It's just fantastic. It's an amazing sport. But it takes a lot to, or at least it took a lot for me to advance through that sport. I started off flying and soloing in a low performance ship. I moved into my first single seat sailplane, a little 126, which I had a blast with. And then I decided, long story behind this, but essentially I decided I needed to fly with a group of guys who I shall call sky gods. And I call them sky gods because I would hear them on the radio and they would go hundreds of miles with no engine. They'd run the Appalachian Ridge. They ran all these fantastic flights. And I was really curious. But in order to fly with them, I needed my own plane. So I went on a quest to buy an airplane, another set of stories. And I ended up with an amazing ship that was built for a gentleman to fly in the worlds. Everybody knew this airplane. She flew beautifully and she'd won all these contests. So I show up with the airplane. Now, I've put a few years into flying at this point, which took more than a little bit of resilience. But the first part wasn't that hard. But transitioning into my plane, whose name, by the way, is Whiskey Oscar, those were her contest letters. Whiskey Oscar was a different story. She was much higher performance than anything I'd flown. Um, I had to get in and just fly her the first time. It's a single seat ship. She had 5 or 6 flap settings from -11 to 55 degrees. So when you're landing, you're looking over your feet. Winglets, a CG hook, which meant you had to fly the plane that you don't know how to fly yet. From the very first moment it rolled. It took a lot of resilience and a lot of just work and dedication to to learn to fly and to continue that flying career. I later took her cross country. I moved out west. I stationed her at Minden, which is one of the best places in the world to fly. You can go from Minden to the Mojave Desert and back on a really good day. You can get over 30,000 feet on a wave day pretty easily. So it's soaring's an interesting sport, and for me, that has been the analogy that I use to look at so much of my life. What goes up goes down. You can't park on cloud nine. There are just so many little aviation tidbits that come out of flying that's what's really guided my life. And it took a great deal as a woman in a man's sport to persevere and to advance, through different types of aircraft. And I am very grateful that I stuck with it. I'm very grateful for all that I did. I think that some of my best stories of resilience, which I won't go into now, but I go into some of them in my book, Bump in the Road, they come out of flying. And I learned an enormous amount doing that.
Another analogy, your plane cannot go far without having some current. If you have still air, if everything's calm and still, how far is it actually going to go?
Only your glide ratio. The thing that's so interesting about soaring is that soaring pilots actually welcome instability.
Yeah.
Instability is opportunity. So when you have unstable air, you have something to work with.
Well, what was it? What is that quote for boats? Boats are not built to be harbored. They're built for currents, right? They're built for, and that is a, I can see why you use those analogies because, you know, nothing gets done by sitting still.
No.
Nothing gets done by sitting still. You gotta make waves. You gotta get out there. The louder we bang the drum, and the reality is in when we're looking at equality and pay, wage, and so forth and so on, we are actually there's all new studies coming out. We are actually starting to get those equalities in that traditional pay, wage, CEO, things like that. When you look at, life cycles and where people are at, women versus men, where it's still really lagging is in this entrepreneurial world and in this the SME world. There's still a huge lag there. Women are 3 times as likely to start a small business, but men are 3 times as likely to scale a small business. And it's because men can get funding and women don't. And it is as simple as that. If you're starving from the beginning, it takes you longer to scale and ramp up, and you may not get to that ramp up stage if you have struggled for 5 years, right? So it's fascinating the differences that are going on out there. Tell me, what can readers expect from your first book? I'm really excited about this. Walk me through the construct of your first book and what can readers expect from it?
I'm really excited about it too. I have 15 chapters that are taken from different podcasts with different guests, where I tell a little bit of a story of my own as it relates to the topic, like perseverance, for example. And then we focus on the guest and their story. Um, and every chapter ends with some questions to consider, but there's a workbook that accompanies this so that you can look across all these chapters, all these amazing stories, and pull out the wisdom that pertains to you. And the book ends with really five ideas, 5 paths to developing a more meaningful and conscious and peaceful life. Because I think once you find that consciousness and peace, oh, life changes so much. It goes when you go from being externally oriented to internally oriented, you start to really own your own power. And I think for women in business, that is so important. Women everywhere, and it means getting not only to know yourself, but also know the things that block you. Learn how to deal with them. Learn how to become the best version of yourself you can be at this point in time.
I love the fact that you're putting a workbook with it.
I'm really
And will
excited.
this,
Your book is
yeah,
terrific, I may say
is
so.
this
It's
is
terrific.
this going to lead to like workshops that you could do at events? Is this going to lead into some form of coaching program or anything like that? Is there anything like what's this if I could wave a magic wand and everything that's kind of spinning around in your head could come to fruition, let's say in the next 6 months, what would this product look like in its fully matured? Like, yeah, I'm just curious.
It could lead to a workshop type environment, online, virtually, or in person. I think it could lend itself to a course, online. I don't see myself doing one-on-one coaching.
Yeah,
I'm a 30,000 foot person.
I'm with you. I'm
You
with you.
know, I'm and my strengths, I don't think well, I enjoy one-to-one things. I think my strengths are a little bit more global. I think I'm good at taking really diverse pieces of information, pulling them together and presenting concepts that can benefit you personally now. I think that I can do that on a larger scale rather than on a one-to-one scale.
Pat, let me ask you an odd question here. Do any of the gliders come as two-seaters? So
Yes, they
people can
do.
they do. Okay.
That's
I
why
have
that's why you learn to
I
fly.
have an idea brewing in my head. And you know what? If people really want to know what's brewing in my head, just pop over to the website. I can see something because you're in Arizona has incredible retreat facilities and conference facilities. Some of the best in the country are down in Arizona. Um, Pat, I have an idea. I love what you're doing. I love what you're doing. But that 30,000 foot, this is like the hamster brain is going here. The wheels are rolling. I think everybody should get a little Pat in their life because it's the perspective. Pat's perspective, it could really help people move, especially in a world where right now we're all being pinched financially. We're all rethinking our career paths. We've come through basically we're sitting in dysregulation, fear, uncertainty, no sign in end, right? That is the definition of a dysregulated individual. And when we think of society through COVID, or through, you know, cancer or any of these things, the reality, fear, uncertainty, and no sight and end are the three things that alter this. And I think your perspective, Pat, coming through true dysregulation on a personal level and on a global level, and bringing perspective back into space, into place, and then removing that fear
Well,
because you're
no,
taking control.
absolutely. Although control is an illusion. I have a whole chapter on that.
Oh. Well, you're taking action. Let's remove that word, control. You're taking action. That
Yeah.
is when you're in action, when you're in movement, you're going in a direction, and maybe it's the wrong direction, and you have to pivot left or right, or you have to do all these things. But the reality is, you're in your emotion, and you need to be in motion in order to go the distance, in order to achieve great things, in order to see amazing things. So
No, you are
um,
so right about that. And I would ask everybody to think about this. If you can inject some energy in your life, it's okay if you don't start off on the right path. You'll eventually find your way, but bring some energy and it will change everything.
borrow it for a while if you need it. Listen in to podcasts, read books, find a sphere. It may not be in your backyard. Most of my sphere is online
Yeah.
because I the truth is when you hit certain levels, you somewhat outgrow mindsets of people that are in your direct physical space. You have to reach further to find people that you can align with and can inspire you. And that's okay. That's okay. There's
Actually,
a reason,
it's
a season, a lifetime.
it's important. I think it's really important not only to grow, but to who you surround yourself with really matters. And we have some
Yeah.
stories in the book about that too. But
Ex-
it does matter. They say the five most influential people in your life really have a significant impact on you. And it's okay to grow and to leave some people behind. It doesn't mean you don't care about them or they're not great
yeah.
people. It's just that your needs have changed.
Well, and they say, show me your friends and I'll show you your future. And you know what? I'm 53. I have a future. I have 20 years of work in front of me, and it's not even work because I'm doing what I love. So I have 20, 30 years. And quite frankly, I'm going to Betty White this baby. I'm going right to the very end. I'm going right to the very end because I believe I have a purpose. And I believe anybody who's taken time to listen to this and who's looking for leadership, looking for the successful clues, looking for an alignment, I believe you have a purpose. I believe that each of us, if we step out, because there's too many people sitting silent, way too many people sitting silent. All right, my dear, where can people find you, follow you, and engage with you?
Bumpintheroad.us is the website. Sign up there. The basic podcast is always free. Let's see, Facebook, Bump in the Road, Bump in the RD Road, Bump in the RD on Facebook. I'm at Cancer Road Trip on Twitter because that's how I started the account. And I don't know, I have 17 or 18,000 followers or so, and I wasn't going to recreate that. So at Cancer Road Trip on Twitter, and actually the website Cancer Road Trip is still up if you're curious. I transitioned into the podcast using that platform. So under the blog, there are some podcasts, but if you go a little further back, you can follow some of my travels to Africa and beyond. And there's some fun reading there.
Excellent. Well, this has been incredibly insightful because I do believe success leaves clues. And we need to be looking towards those who are leading us, right? Who are willing to step out in front. And I'm grateful that you are stepping out in front. You've got my curiosity up on these planes, these sail planes, because that sounds to me a whole lot better than surfing, because surfing, there's sharks. I'm just saying. Just saying. I have fear of dark water.
I won't tell you any of my more fearful tales.
Okay. So share with us a quote that inspires you.
One of my all-time favorite quotes. I love Joseph Campbell. I'm a Joseph Campbell junkie. And this quote speaks to me because it's about curiosity and wonder, surrender. And most of all, it's about being in the present moment, which is the only place you can create your future, is here and now. And Joseph Campbell writes, "We must be willing to let go of the life we planned so as to have the life that is waiting for us."
Anybody got goosebumps? And you say that so beautifully. And I love the fact that you put the pre-frame around it. That is, and you know what? The present, there's a reason they call it the present. It's your gift. Not everybody gets that gift. So be present. You know what? I have to say thank you, Pat. I have to thank you so much for sharing your time this morning, your insight, your inspiration. You are a true treasure, and I look forward to doing more stuff with you. I have some ideas. Stay tuned, folks.
Bring them on.
Excellent. You know what? This is Kim Talks Resilience. I'm your host, Kim Hayden. And again, thank you for joining us. If you ever feel that your resiliency is lagging, even just that wee bit, be sure to listen and lean in to our resilient community. You can go to resilientgift.com. That's resilientgift.com and just sign up. Totally free, never going to be a charge, anything. And they'll just let you know when the bi-monthly magazine comes out, when new episodes are releasing, and if we're doing some really cool events, which we have one coming up. So you know what? Go over to resilientgift.com. And in the meantime, folks, be good to yourself. You deserve it.
Thank you for joining us here today at Kim Talks Resilience. I'm your host, Kim Hayden, and I'd love to invite you to our resilient community at resilientgift.com. That's resilientgift.com, and we'll send you our magazine and tickets for upcoming events and all sorts of cool things we do here. So be sure to keep watching, and you know what? Don't forget to like, subscribe, comment, and share, because we all know that sharing is caring.